Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of I Learned About Maintenance Human Factors from that. And it's my privilege to be joined by Scott Rexwinkle. Scott, great to have you back on the show.
Hey, Sam, good to see you again.
Thank you. And Scott, we've got an accident to look at tonight, which is really interesting. I think we're going to get quite a lot out of this, even though it did happen a few years back. And for those of you who are new to this show, you can follow along, propelled by Integra. Please go ahead and subscribe and like this video and share it with other people if you think it's going to help them. And of course, pop over to www.propelbyintegra.com as well for more information about me and what we're doing. So Scott, let's dive straight into this. The way we structure these videos is we look at what happened. So the aircraft had an accident. We describe the events that led up to that. We then look at it from a maintenance perspective, specifically the human factors that we believe contributed to this accident. And then thirdly, we'll end with three things that we can take away from this, three lessons we can learn, because, you know, being a good mechanic or engineer, it's all about continuous improvement and continually learning as we go. Okay, Scott, let's dive straight into this accident that took place on September the 11th, 1991 at Eagle Lake, Texas. And it was approximately 10:03 in the morning, Central Daylight Time. So the aircraft involved was an Embraer 120 and N number was November 33701. It was being operated as an FAA Part 135 air taxi and commuter, scheduled as Continental Express Flight 2574. Flight call sign was Jetlink 2574, and it departed Laredo International Airport, Texas, at around about 9:09 in the morning, en route to Houston International Airport, or Intercontinental Airport. So it was assigned a cruise altitude of flight level 250 and was later instructed to descend to flight level 240. At approximately 0954, the flight was cleared out of flight level 240 to 9,000. And Jetlink 2574 began its descent. At approximately 1000 hours, Jetlink 2574 acknowledged an amended arrival clearance, which was the last radio transmission from the flight. And radar data showed that the airplane, and this is where it all starts to go wrong for the pilots, it shows that the airplane was in a descent passing through about 11,800 feet, mean sea level, when a sudden pitch over occurred. And the aircraft literally went nose down. Flight data recorder showed that there was then a negative vertical acceleration of at least 3.375 negative Gs. And the maximum the FDR can record was this, as well as roll and yaw moments, heading changes, and sudden changes in engine parameters. Prior to the pitch over, the engines were operating normally. There were 8 eyewitnesses who described various observations, which included flying normally, wings level, slightly nose down, suddenly consumed by a fireball, wingtips and part of the tail protruding from the fireball, a bright flash, orange or red-orange flames at time of flash or immediately thereafter, spluttering engines followed by 3 pops, a revving sound, a flat spin to the left until impact, left wing dangling from blown out area, right wing missing, flying parts during downward spiral. And after impact, the airplane was upright in a wings level attitude, partially embedded in the ground and burning. Unfortunately, all 14 people were fatally injured. The accident occurred in daylight visual meteorological conditions, so visibility wasn't an issue here. Wreckage was spread over 1.5 nautical miles. The horizontal stabilizer, the top of the T-type tail, had separated from the aircraft before impact and was lying about 650 feet southwest of the main wreckage. The leading edge, the ice boot assembly for the left side, was missing from the horizontal stabilizer, and it was later found about 3/4 of a mile west of the main impact site. The horizontal stabilizer and about 1/3 of the upper vertical stabilizer had separated from the aircraft before ground impact. So quite a lot going on there, Scott. I know that we've just, we packed quite a bit of information in there, but that's the background that we've pulled out of the NTSB reports and associated documentation that led up to this. Any comments before we move on to what happened?
A very quick and dirty summary of what went on in the events leading up to this, or the events that led up to this accident. It's quite a bit of information in there and a lot to digest. But yeah, go ahead and we'll jump into the what the cause actually was.
Yes, this is where it gets interesting. You know, I really love to unpack these, and I know you do as well. It's just fascinating to know what happens behind the scenes, and certainly from a maintenance perspective. So let's look at this. What happened from maintenance perspective specifically? Be thinking as I go through this, you know, from a human factor perspective, what was going on. All right. So let's look at what led up to this flight. So on August the 26th, 1991, a quality control inspector noted both leading edge de-ice boots as watch list items because there was dry rotted pinholes the entire length of the boots. On September the 10th, 1991, so just under a month later, Maintenance Control Office scheduled both horizontal stabilized leading edge boots on November 33701 to be replaced. The aircraft was pulled into the maintenance hangar at IAH during the second shift at about 21:30 in the evening. Replacement of de-ice boots required that the leading edge de-ice boot assembly for that side of the horizontal stabilizer be removed from the stabilizer. Now, normally, while still attached to the stabilizer, the old device boot or de-ice boot would be stripped from the composite structure of the leading edge. The de-ice fluid lines would be disconnected and the leading edge would then be removed and a new de-ice boot bonded on. Then the leading edge de-ice boot assembly would be reinstalled on the horizontal stabilizer by means of approximately 47 attaching screws for each of the top and bottom sides of the assembly. T-tout was about 20 feet above the ground. That's important to note, and required a hydraulic lift work platform to access. Work was assigned by the second shift work supervisor. Now, this is interesting. Two supervisors were on that second shift. One normally assigned to the flight line, but on this occasion, he took charge of the maintenance on this aircraft. The second supervisor was in charge of a C-check on another aircraft. So two mechanics removed most of the screws on the bottom side of the right leading edge. That's important to mentally note that. So it's the right leading edge. Two mechanics removed most of the screws on the bottom side of that and partially removed the de-ice boot bonded to the front of the right side leading edge. The inspector who had climbed on top of the T-tail had removed the attaching screws on the right top of the right side leading edge, the ones that were left, and then he walked across the T-tail and removed the attaching screws from the top of the left side leading edge. What we've not said so far is that we haven't mentioned screws on the bottom of the left leading edge yet. We've not mentioned whether they were removed or not. The screws continued holding the horizontal stabilizer leading edge assembly in place, and they were not removed. That's on the left-hand side, right, Scott?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, so the top sets of attaching screws for both the left and the right horizontal stabilizer leading edge assemblies were not visible from the ground. The right leading edge assembly was removed from the horizontal stabilizer following a shift change by third shift mechanics. So we've got a few things going on here. We've got a quality control inspector who's getting involved in the actual maintenance. We've got the inspector walking from the right hand top of the stabilizer to the left hand top of the stabilizer. So this is now building a picture. Say again.
Yeah. And we have the supervisors that are also part of the picture. Two shift supervisors. So there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah.
People.
So we're expecting in a situation like this, communication is going to be key.
Very key.
All right. So a new de-ice boot was bonded to the front of the leading edge at a workbench inside the hangar. That would be the right-hand side, right, Scott?
Correct. They're on the right-hand side. Yes.
Okay. So during the third shift, the aircraft was pushed out of the hangar to make room for work on another aircraft. And we know that happens quite a lot.
Yep.
In the hangar environment. No supplemental direct light was placed on the aircraft as it sat outside where work continued on the aircraft. The third shift mechanics reinstalled the right side leading edge assembly. Both new and used screws were used to attach the top and bottom of the assembly to the right horizontal stabilizer. So the right-hand stabilizer, the ice boot there, and the leading edge was reattached to the aircraft. The second shift work on the aircraft was indicated on the second shift inspector's written turnover sheet or shift handover sheet. However, the incoming third shift inspector reviewed the sheet before the entry was made. So we've now got a breakdown in communication. We've now got a breakdown in shift handover. Third shift maintenance supervisor and mechanics were not verbally informed of the removal of the upper screws on the left side leading edge. You know, the side that I think it was the inspector walked from the right side to the left side, decided to be helpful and help out, removed those screws that were not visible from the ground. It never entered the shift handover. The work cards had originally been assigned to the third shift for completion, but the second shift supervisor, who was assigned to the aircraft, elected to start work on the de-ice boots to assist the third shift with the workloads. Here we can see the intention is good by this shift supervisor. You know, can I help? Can I get involved and try and, you know, help the next shift along? In addition, second shift supervisor did not issue the work cards to the second shift mechanics because they are in a package assigned to the third shift. Because of this, no entries were made on the reverse side of the work cards that would have informed the third shift supervisor and third shift mechanics that work had been started by the second shift on both the left and right horizontal stabilizer de-ice boots. Lastly, a third shift inspector later reported that he had gained access to the top of the horizontal stabilizer to assist with the installation and inspection of the de-ice lines on the right side of the horizontal stabilizer. He stated that he was not aware of the removal of the screws from the top of the left leading edge assembly. And in the dark outside the hangar, he did not see that the screws were missing from the top of the left side leading edge assembly for the horizontal stabilizer. And unfortunately, that separated from the aircraft when the aircraft was making that rapid descent. And that is what led ultimately to the aircraft crashing. Scott, over to you for a couple of minutes.
Oh man, Sam, take a breath. That was a lot.
A lot to unpack
a lot
here.
in there. Oh man. Yeah. So just from the very get-go of this, we understand that you know, there's a packet of work to be done, and it's been assigned to third shift, and that packet's not being opened, right? Because it's been assigned to third shift. Second shift has a little bit of extra time on their hands before the end of their shift. They know that this boot swap is going to be happening this evening, and they figure, hey, you know what? We'll help third shift out, and we're going to get a jump start on this project. So the intentions are really good. The downfall here is the lack of communication between second and third shift, because they didn't go ahead and, I guess, open that packet and record what had been done and by whom. Then they don't have the ability to turn that information over to third shift and have a complete picture painted for third shift to understand the scope of where the project is, right? So you've got a lot of moving people here, and then just a complete failure of communication and the ability to hand off the shift work.
And I think, you know, communication absolutely is key. And, you know, in this situation, it seems like the guys are actually trying to help each other out, even between shifts. But because they went outside of the work that they would normally do and got involved in other work or other responsibilities, that didn't make it onto that shift handover. So there's quite a bit there around communication that's really key, and we could unpack.
Yeah, and I think not only the communication in this instance, but we also see the good intentions of, say, the inspector for the second shift. He's wanting to jump on top of the horizontal here and help out by removing the screws from the upper surface of the boot or the leading edge. And organizations, you get your job title and your description and your responsibilities, you know, and while your intentions may be really good, because you're going to go from being an inspector back to a maintenance position where you're getting your hands dirty and helping out, but when you step outside of the role that you've been assigned, that can also pose a threat to the continuity of the communication within the organization. So if I'm the inspector, I go to help out, I'm no longer, I'm almost going to say, how we talked about the independent inspection requirements, right?
Yeah.
And the ability to get fresh eyes on a project or the fresh eyes on a repair that's been done, to get that outside perspective. If I'm the inspector inspecting this project and I've now been in hands-on, getting dirty and working on it, I might lose that perspective or fail to communicate or we just lose that whole continuity
Yeah.
of roles. So, and it's, like I said, it's a very odd situation again where you're trying to do things really nice and help out with your crew or with your shifts, but you got to kind of stay within your role of what you're supposed to be doing, because those roles are there for a reason. And they're there to create the checks and balances necessary to assure that the work is performed as it's supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you are going to step outside of your primary role and you're going to get involved, you're going to help out, you've got to have a greater level of self-awareness. You need to understand, what's the potential impact of me doing this? What's the potential consequence of me doing this? Am I going to be dropping the ball in some other area? Is this actually, a good intention, but is it actually a distraction? Is it distracting me from my primary role? And if I'm distracted from my primary role, how's that affecting the primary role? But also, by getting involved with a maintenance task, what might my mind be on my primary role? So I'm trying to help out, I'm trying to do a good deed, but actually my mind is back on my primary role, which means I'm not focused on the task in hand, which means that maintenance error can potentially creep in.
Yeah, and in this situation, like I was saying, because this was an inspector that jumped in and tried to take on the role of a mechanic at this point, he kind of lost that ability to do, I think, his role to the best of his ability. And the evidence that we have of that is in the actual shift change or the log that he created for the work that he completed.
Yep.
And this is a quote from his entry. This is the full description of the entry that he made. And it says, quote, "Helped the mechanic remove the de-ice boots," end quote. So when you leave a very vague description of the work that you had actually completed, it doesn't paint a broader or cleaner or clearer picture for the incoming shift. That's a very, very vague statement that you just, that you helped mechanic remove the ice boots. So when they get there and they're looking, third shift gets there and they're looking at the work that's been done, a third shift supervisor is trying to assess what has been done, and they only see the right boot has been removed, and they see only the right boot has been rebonded. And I think they even asked the second shift supervisor, the actual one that was responsible for the C check, who wasn't even responsible for this aircraft. They asked him, "What's the status of this airplane and the status of the boot replacement?" And he says to them that they're only doing the right-hand side. They hadn't started to work on the left-hand side. And from the logbook entry, or this shift change entry that is made by the second shift inspector, stating that he just helped the mechanic remove the ice boots, there's nothing there to indicate or lead you to believe that the screws from the top of the left-hand side had also been removed at this point. And so when we start to be vague in our descriptions, vague in our logbook entries for that matter, we leave an incomplete picture of the work that's been completed. And that can trickle down to say we're not in a commercial setting, we're in a general aviation setting even. And I've got an airplane, and I'm doing the annual inspection on it, and I'm reviewing the logbooks. And I see in there that the logbooks state in the previous year that the right-hand magneto was retimed at 20 degrees top dead center. Okay. And I do my inspection, and I find I've got to retime that mag again back to 20 from, say, I find it at 17 now. Well, if I don't know on that previous logbook entry if it was previously at 17 or was previously at 15 or was it previously at 19 and then they reset to 20, I don't know the full picture of what's going on, and where I need to start doing a diagnostics or a little bit more of an investigation into why am I having this mag that continually needs to be retimed. Same thing can go with a fuel pump. If it just simply states that I have adjusted fuel flow or fuel pressure in accordance with, and I left the maintenance manual section, that doesn't paint the whole picture for the incoming mechanic next year that may have to make it the same adjustment. He doesn't know what base you were starting from. Was it too high? Was it too low? What exactly was it you were adjusting? Was it only at, let's say, 38 gallons per hour? You adjusted it up to 41. But we need to know those things so that we can make a proper have the full picture and make a proper diagnosis of what needs to be done to remedy the situation.
Something that's really struck me through this is when you're writing a shift handover, or even if you're, staging a job card or a work card, keep it up to date throughout doing the task itself. Somebody once said to me at an airline I worked at, Sam, fill out your work card or your task card, and as you go, sign and stamp as you go against the different steps. Because what happens if you have an accident and you get rushed off to hospital and another team have to follow up behind you, and it's not the end of a shift? Because so many people think, oh, I'll leave it till the end of the shift to write something up. But what happens if you're late at the end of the shift and you've got to get home for, birthday party or a meal that's been put on a table, or you suddenly have to dash out to pick up your sick child from school, or something else has happened that is unexpected? Actually, you then leave a situation where you've either done an incomplete handover or nothing at all. And I think of a handover as a narrative. I want to be building a picture in my head of what I've done, and that will then help the incoming person to visualize where I've left a certain task.
Yeah, I think that's a really good points. I think those are not only great points for working line maintenance or commercial maintenance on larger aircraft and the stamps and the shift handover, but these are things that translate easily into general aviation as well. When we go through and we're doing a 50-hour inspection or a 100-hour inspection or an annual inspection, or the 200 or 300-hour inspections, and you've got your checklist there in front of you, a lot of guys will go through and they go, okay, well, I'm going to go do landing gear group, and they'll start going through and just doing the items on the list. They'll come back to the toolbox and say at break time, and then they'll go through that checklist. Okay, check that, did it, and just go down the line. But you've got to keep up with those as you do them and mark them off, just for the same reasons you just said. I think it's a great point. And I think in this accident, we had stuff that it not only errors in communication and in handoff. I think there's some other smaller outlying factors that definitely or potentially played a fairly large role in this accident. Environment, I think, was a potentially had the potential to be a large contributor to this. When you have an aircraft that's pushed back out on a ramp during third shift, and then the work continues outdoors at night without supplemental lighting, you're kind of setting yourself up already for a failure in the ability to complete a visual inspection on the areas that were manipulated during your work. So this is not something I looked into on this case, but with I think I mentioned to you earlier, weather. We don't know what the weather was like that night. Was it windy? Was it moonless? Was there rain forecast? You take all those factors into account, and all of a sudden you're perched 20 feet up in the air on the back of an airplane that may be moving around somewhat, and you're required to complete inspections and sign-offs for this aircraft. That makes the work environment very challenging at that point.
All right, Scott, personal minimums. These are great little cards that can just help you capture on a day-to-day basis any potential for to be influeed by negative human factors.
I'll tell you what, I'm doing a 50-hour inspection tomorrow on a 182. I'll be taking this with me, just because I think it's a great little handy card to just reference back to. And after I get done doing the inspection, I get getting ready to sign this thing off, I can sit here and run through this real quick again on the after the task situation side. And just make sure that mentally and physically I'm looking through this and make sure I did everything I need to do and this thing's good to go.
And I wonder,
I like it.
Thanks, Scott. And I wonder if if the guys on shift that night, if they'd have had this in their pocket, and it talks about, have I completed all the applicable paperwork correctly? Am I willing to fly in the aircraft once it's approved for return to service? That would be a good one for you for tomorrow after your.
Yeah, I know. Well, I probably will be going to flight anyways afterwards. So.
Hey,
yes.
Scott, tell me, we've got 3 things that we can take away from this.
Communication. I don't want to say the only 3, but to tell you what, that's the big one from the day is communication. You're completing your entries with, and plenty of description of what you have done. Don't leave them vague. Be descriptive in them. But communication, if take anything from today and leave everything else aside, just communication is huge, huge.
Yeah, brilliant. So I'm going to count that as the first thing we can take away, because that was really good. The second thing we can take away is learn these 3 elements of effective communication. I'm going to put them up on the screen again. Effective task and shift handover, it depends on the 3 basic elements. The outgoing person's their ability to hand it over, the incoming person's ability to understand what the first person was on about, and the third element there is somewhere formal for that handover process take place outside of distraction. Don't have it somewhere where you're going to be distracted. And then thirdly, it's got to be assumptions for me. If you're going to identify the assumptions you might be making and clarify them. Absolutely clarify them. And I'll take it a step further. Try and identify the assumptions that somebody else that you've communicated to might be making about what you've said. And the best way to do that is to ask them, are you making assumption? What's your understanding of what I've said? Can you just tell me it back? Sometimes I do that with my wife. I'll relay some information, and then just to double check that she's actually understood what I've said, I'll say, hey, darling, do you want to repeat to me what I've just said from your understanding? Doesn't always go as well as I intend, but hey, got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and it's when you're saying you don't make assumptions, but then again, when you're asking someone for clarification and stuff, or you don't want to assume that somebody did something correctly, you're double checking the work. Don't be afraid of them being offended by it. They should not be offended by it. You should not be offended by it. I've been in those situations before where you have a mechanic that works in your facility that everyone has them, the grumpy old mechanic, or the guy who's like, I don't need anyone looking at my work. I'm good. You think I don't know what I'm doing? Why are you over here looking at what I did?
Yeah.
No, you've got to get beyond that, and you've got to be able to know that, hey, I'm not doing this to offend you. I'm not saying you're not a good mechanic, but what we need to do is have the second set of eyes. I don't want to assume that you did it correctly and then put my name on it and ship it out the door. I want to make sure it's done right, and that I'm not assuming that you know what you're doing, that you did it correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, the person who says that, that's the day you do need to check their work. I think, because we've got no idea what's going on in their head or what's going on at home that's, maybe led to that. And I think as well, the one thing that stops us probably from accepting somebody saying that to us is really pride.
Yeah.
Pride and probably complacency sitting in there somewhere that we've not recognized. So yeah, great. Scott, they were the 3 things. This was a really good accident to get into, some really key points. Thank you very much. For those of you who are watching, I hope you've enjoyed this. Think about what we've talked about. Check out the links below. Please subscribe. Please share this video as we're trying to, continue to make more of these as well to really help us in this great industry that we work in. And be blessed. Don't forget your personal minimums. Scott, it's been a pleasure.
Good talking to you, Sam. It's always fun.
Next time. Bye-bye.
Yeah.